My name is Elena Hart, and I used to believe in fairy tales. At 28 years old, I thought I had everything a woman could want. A handsome husband who ran a successful tech company, a beautiful penthouse overlooking the city, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. But as I stood in front of the mirror on our 5th wedding anniversary, adjusting the red dress I'd bought specially for tonight, I didn't know that my fairy tale was about to shatter into a million pieces. I had spent weeks planning this anniversary dinner. Marcus, my husband, had been working late for months, always stressed about some big business deal. I wanted tonight to be special, to remind him of the love we once shared. The restaurant reservation was made at Lumiere, the same place where he proposed to me 6 years ago. I could still remember that night, how he got down on one knee under the stars on their rooftop, how my heart nearly burst with joy. The wait that broke everything. I arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock sharp, 30 minutes early because I was too excited to wait at home. The hostess led me to our reserved table by the window, the best spot in the house. I ordered Marcus's favorite wine and waited. 7:30 came and went. I sent him a text message with a little heart emoji. No response. By 8 o'clock, I called him. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. The other diners began to look at me with pity. A woman alone at a romantic restaurant on what was obviously a special occasion. The waiter kept coming by, asking if I wanted to order, his eyes filled with sympathy that made my chest tight. I smiled and said I was still waiting, but inside, worry was turning into something darker. At 9 o'clock, I paid for the wine I'd barely touched and left. My hands shook as I called Marcus again. This time, someone answered, but it wasn't my husband. It was a woman's voice, breathless and giggling. Marcus can't come to the phone right now. He's busy. Then she hung up. The truth in the penthouse. My heart pounded as I drove home faster than I should have. Every red light felt like torture. When I burst through our penthouse door, the apartment was dark except for a light coming from our bedroom. I heard voices, laughter, sounds that made my stomach turn. I wanted to run, to leave and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But my feet carried me forward, down the hallway to our bedroom door. I pushed it open. Marcus was there, in our bed, with someone I never expected. My best friend since college, Sophie. The woman who'd been my maid of honor at our wedding. The woman I'd trusted with every secret, every fear, every dream. They didn't even notice me at first, too wrapped up in each other. When Marcus finally saw me standing in the doorway, he didn't look guilty or sorry. He looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. Elena, he said, pulling the sheet around himself. This isn't what it looks like. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of that line, the oldest cliché in the world, coming out of my husband's mouth while he was literally in bed with my best friend. Really, Marcus? That's what you're going with. Sophie sat up, and I waited for her to apologize, to cry, to show some remorse. Instead, she looked at me with something close to satisfaction. Elena, you were going to find out eventually. Marcus and I have been in love for over a year. The divorce papers. A year. They'd been carrying on behind my back for a year. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every time Sophie had come over for wine and complaints about her dating life. All lies. My legs felt weak, but I refused to collapse in front of them. I turned and walked out of that bedroom, out of that apartment, and didn't stop until I was sitting in my car in the parking garage. That's when I let myself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. 5 years of marriage, 8 years together, all based on a lie. I drove to a hotel and checked in, ignoring the confused look the receptionist gave my fancy dress and tear-stained face. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Marcus and 32 text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I called a lawyer. By noon, I had filed for divorce. By evening, Marcus showed up at my hotel room with papers of his own. Sign these, he said, throwing a folder on the bed. I'm willing to give you a fair settlement, but I want this done quickly and quietly. I opened the folder and read through the documents. Fair settlement? He was offering me $50,000 and nothing else. No share of the company we'd built together. No claim to the penthouse I'd decorated. Nothing from the life we'd created. According to these papers, I had contributed nothing to our marriage. You're joking, I said, looking up at him. I worked alongside you for 5 years. I helped build your company from nothing. I gave up my own career to support yours. Marcus's face was cold, a stranger's face. You were my wife, Elena. You did what wives do. That doesn't entitle you to half of everything I've worked for. Sign the papers, take the money, and move on. Sophie and I are getting married next month, and I'd rather not have this drama hanging over us. The public humiliation. Next month. They couldn't even wait for the divorce to be final. The pain in my chest turned to ice. I'll see you in court, I said quietly. Marcus's expression darkened. You really want to do this the hard way? Fine. But remember, Elena, I have lawyers who will tear you apart. You have nothing. No job, no money of your own, no leverage. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. He left, and I sat alone in that hotel room, looking at those divorce papers. He was right about one thing. I had nothing. I'd spent 5 years building his dream instead of my own. I'd let my own career as a marketing consultant die while I played the supportive wife. I trusted the wrong people and paid the price. But Marcus was wrong about one thing. I wasn't going to make this ugly. I was going to make it devastating. The disappearance. I signed the divorce papers the next day, taking his insulting settlement without a fight. Everyone was shocked. My lawyer tried to convince me to fight for more, but I refused. I wanted out fast, and I wanted Marcus to think he'd won. I moved out of the city entirely, telling no one where I was going. I deleted my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and vanished. For the first month, I lived in a small apartment in a city 3 hours away. I spent my days crying, eating ice cream, and watching terrible television. But slowly, the grief began to turn into something else. Anger, determination, a burning desire to prove that I was more than Marcus's discarded wife. I started researching, planning, rebuilding. I reached out to old clients from before my marriage, people who remembered my work. I updated my skills, took online courses, and created a new professional profile. Not as Elena Hart, Marcus's ex-wife, but as Elena Morgan, a business consultant specializing in company turnarounds and strategic growth. The mysterious offer. 3 months after my divorce was finalized, I received an email that would change everything. It came from someone named Mr. Chun, a private investor I'd never heard of. The email was simple and direct. He had heard about my work and wanted to meet to discuss a business opportunity. He offered to fly me to New York, all expenses paid, for a consultation. I almost deleted it, thinking it was a scam. But something made me look closer. I researched the email address and found it connected to a legitimate investment firm with billions in assets. Mr. Chun was real, and apparently, he was interested in me. The meeting was set for the following week at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. I bought a new suit, styled my hair differently, and practiced my pitch 100 times. When I walked into that hotel conference room, I was no longer the broken woman who'd been betrayed. I was a professional, confident, and capable. Mr. Chun was not what I expected. He was younger than I'd imagined, perhaps in his early 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. He was accompanied by a team of lawyers and advisors, all of whom looked at me with interest. Ms. Morgan, he said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. I've been following your career with interest. My career? I asked, confused. I've only been active again for a few months. Mr. Chin smiled, and it was a smile that held secrets. I know more about you than you might think, Ms. Morgan. Or should I say, Mrs. Hart. The offer that changes everything. My blood ran cold. He knew who I was. He knew about Marcus, about the divorce, about everything. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, starting to stand. Please sit, Mr. Chin said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm not here to threaten you or expose you. I'm here to offer you something very few people ever get. Revenge. I sat back down slowly, my heart racing. What do you mean? Mr. Chin opened a folder and slid it across the table to me. Inside were detailed documents about Marcus's company, financial reports, internal memos, things that should have been confidential. Your ex-husband's company is not as successful as it appears, he explained. Collapse, bad investments, poor management, and some questionable business practices that could land him in serious legal trouble. I looked through the papers, my mind racing. Everything Marcus had taken from me, everything he'd built while pushing me aside, was falling apart. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to buy his company, Mr. Chin said simply. But I need someone who understands it from the inside, someone who knows its weaknesses and strengths, someone who has motivation to see it succeed under new management. You want me to help you take over Marcus's company? I asked, hardly believing what I was hearing. Mr. Chen leaned forward, his eyes intense. I want you to do more than that, Ms. Morgan. I want you to destroy him professionally. Make him feel the same helplessness you felt when he threw you away like garbage. And then, I want you to build something better from the ashes. I'm offering you a position as a senior consultant with my firm, a generous salary, and a chance to prove that you're worth more than he ever gave you credit for. The choice. I should have said no. I should have walked away and built my life without thoughts of revenge. But as I sat there, looking at those documents, remembering the way Marcus had looked at me with such contempt, remembering Sophie's satisfied smile, I felt something snap inside me. What do I have to do? I asked. Mr. Chen smiled, and this time it was genuine. First, we transform you completely. New look, new identity in the business world, new skills. You already started this process yourself, but we'll take it further. Then, you'll infiltrate Marcus's business circles, gain the trust of his competitors and partners, and gather the information we need to make our move. It will take time, perhaps a year or more. But in the end, you'll have your revenge, and you'll have a career that will make you independently wealthy and powerful. I looked down at my hands, the hands that used to wear Marcus's ring. They were empty now, but they didn't have to stay that way. I could fill them with something better than a failed marriage. I could fill them with success, power, and the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. When do we start? I asked. Mr. Chen stood and extended his hand. Right now, Ms. Morgan. Welcome to your new life. As I shook his hand, I felt something shift inside me. The old Elena Hart, the trusting wife who believed in fairy tales, was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and hungry for justice. Marcus had made a terrible mistake when he underestimated me. He was about to learn that the woman he threw away was the biggest threat he'd ever face. The transformation began that very night. Mr. Chen's team moved with surprising efficiency. Within hours, I was sitting in a luxury salon where stylists worked on changing my appearance. My long brown hair was cut and dyed a sophisticated shade of auburn. They taught me new ways to style it, sleek and professional. A personal shopper took me to exclusive boutiques where I was fitted for an entire wardrobe of power suits and designer clothes that made me look like I belonged in boardrooms. But the physical transformation was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, I underwent intensive training. Business strategists taught me about hostile takeovers, market manipulation, and corporate warfare. Technology experts showed me how to gather information discreetly. I took accelerated courses in finance, learning to read company reports the way Marcus never thought I could. Every night, I fell into bed exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time since my marriage fell apart, I felt alive. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming something more powerful than I'd ever imagined. The broken woman who signed those divorce papers was disappearing, replaced by someone Marcus would never recognize. 6 months after I shook hands with Mr. Chen, I stood in front of a mirror in my new office and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me was elegant, powerful, and confident. My auburn hair fell in perfect waves around my shoulders. My tailored navy suit fit like it was made for royalty. But the biggest change wasn't on the outside. It was in my eyes. They held a determination that the old Elena Hart never had. My corner office on the 45th floor of the Chun Investment Building overlooked the entire city. From here, I could see the building where Marcus's company was located, just 10 blocks away. Every morning, I looked at that building and reminded myself why I was doing this. Not just for revenge, but to prove that I was always worth more than he believed. Ms. Morgan, your 9 o'clock is here, my assistant Jennifer said through the intercom. I'd hired Jennifer myself, a sharp young woman fresh out of business school who reminded me of who I used to be. Eager, intelligent, and underestimated. Send them in. I replied, sitting down at my desk. Today's meeting was crucial. I was about to meet with 3 of Marcus's biggest business partners, companies that provided essential services to his tech firm. They didn't know that the consultant they were meeting was his ex-wife. They only knew that Elena Morgan had a reputation for turning struggling companies into profit machines. Planting the seeds. The 3 executives walked in, all middle-aged men in expensive suits who probably expected to intimidate the young female consultant. They introduced themselves as Robert, James, and David, representing 3 different tech suppliers. I shook each of their hands with a firm grip and a confident smile. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to the conference table. "I understand you're all concerned about your contracts with Hart Technologies." Robert, the oldest of the three, nodded. "Marcus Hart has been delaying payments for months. We've tried to work with him, but something seems off. We heard you're an expert at evaluating company stability." I opened my laptop and pulled up the research my team had compiled. "I've done a preliminary analysis of Hart Technologies, and I'm afraid the news isn't good. The company is bleeding money faster than anyone realizes. Marcus Hart has been taking on high-risk investments that are failing, and he's been hiding the losses through creative accounting." James leaned forward, his face concerned. "Are you saying we should pull our contracts?" "Not yet," I said, meeting his eyes. "But I would recommend protecting yourselves. Request advance payments instead of net 30 terms. Reduce your exposure gradually. And most importantly, start looking for alternative clients to replace the revenue you'll lose when Hart Technologies eventually collapses." David frowned. "You're that certain it will collapse?" I pulled up a financial projection on the screen, a document my team had spent weeks creating. It showed Hart Technologies' downward spiral in vivid detail. Unless something changes dramatically, Hart Technologies will be insolvent within 18 months. The question isn't if it will fail, but when. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, all three executives had agreed to hire me as a consultant to help them navigate the situation. More importantly, they agreed to subtly pressure Marcus for better payment terms, which would squeeze his already tight cash flow. It was a small move, but it was the first domino in a long line that would eventually fall. The business circle infiltration. Over the next 3 months, I systematically worked my way into Marcus's business world. I became a consultant to his suppliers, his potential investors, even his competitors. Everyone knew Elena Morgan as the sharp consultant who could smell a bad deal from miles away. No one connected her to Elena Hart, the quiet wife who disappeared after a messy divorce. I attended the same business conference as Marcus did, always staying just far enough away that we never directly crossed paths. I watched him from across crowded rooms, saw how he strutted around with Sophie on his arm, showing her off like a trophy. She wore designer clothes now, probably bought with money from the company that should have been half mine. They looked happy, or at least they looked like they thought they should appear happy. But I could see the cracks. Marcus's smile was tighter than it used to be. He checked his phone constantly, his face tense. Sophie clung to his arm possessively, her eyes always scanning the room as if looking for threats. Good. They should feel nervous. Their perfect little world was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. The strategic strikes. My work wasn't just about gathering information. I was actively destabilizing Marcus's business empire, one careful move at a time. When Hart Technologies tried to secure a new round of funding, I made sure the venture capital firms I consulted for knew about the company's hidden problems. When Marcus bid on a lucrative government contract, I helped his competitor prepare a better proposal. I never did anything illegal. I never lied or fabricated evidence. I simply made sure the right people knew the truth about Hart Technologies' financial situation. And the truth, as it turned out, was damaging enough on its own. Mr. Chin watched my progress with approval. "You're a natural at this, Ms. Morgan," he said during one of our weekly meetings. "Marcus Hart has no idea what's hitting him. He's starting to suspect something." I replied, showing him the latest reports. His CFO resigned last week, and 2 board members have requested independent audits. He's scrambling to keep everything together. Mr. Chin nodded thoughtfully. "Good. When a man is desperate, he makes mistakes. And when he makes mistakes, we'll be ready to strike." The charity gala. The real test came 4 months into my campaign. There was a major charity gala being held at the Grand Ballroom, a black tie event that brought together everyone who was anyone in the business world. Marcus would be there. Sophie would be there. And Elena Morgan had received a very special invitation as a rising star in the consulting world. I spent hours getting ready that night. My dress was a stunning emerald green that hugged my curves in all the right places. My hair was styled in an elegant updo. Diamond earrings that I'd bought with my own money sparkled in my ears. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who commanded respect, who turned heads, who belonged in rooms with the rich and powerful. Jennifer whistled when I came out of my office. "Ms. Morgan, you look incredible. Marcus Hart won't know what hit him." "That's exactly the point. I said with a smile. He won't know. The gala was everything I expected. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing like water, women in designer gowns, and men in perfect tuxedos. I walked in alone, my head held high, and immediately felt eyes turning toward me. In my old life, I would have been invisible at an event like this, just Marcus's quiet wife standing in his shadow. Now, I was Elena Morgan, and people wanted to meet me. The confrontation. I was talking with a group of investors when I saw him. Marcus, standing across the room in a tuxedo, laughing at something someone said. Sophie was beside him in a red dress that was trying too hard to be sexy. For a moment, my carefully constructed confidence wavered. Seeing him in person after all these months brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. Then Marcus's eyes swept the room and landed on me. He looked right at me, and I held my breath. Would he recognize me? Could he see past the new hair, the new clothes, the new confidence? His eyes moved on without a flicker of recognition. To him, I was just another beautiful woman at a fancy party. Nothing more. The relief was mixed with something darker. He really didn't see me. Even standing right in front of him, I was invisible to Marcus Hart. Elena Morgan? A voice behind me made me turn. It was Robert, one of the executives I'd met months ago. I've been looking for you. There are some people I'd like you to meet. Robert led me across the room, and suddenly I was walking directly toward Marcus and his group. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm and professional. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Marcus Hart, Robert said cheerfully. I'd like you to meet Elena Morgan. She's the consultant I told you about, the one who's been helping us optimize our supplier relationships. Marcus turned to me with a polite smile, extending his hand. Ms. Morgan, it's a pleasure. Robert speaks very highly of your work. I shook his hand, feeling the familiar calluses on his palm from his old woodworking hobby. His grip was firm and businesslike. There was no recognition in his eyes, no spark of memory. To him, I was a complete stranger. Mr. Hart, I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. I've heard a great deal about Hart Technologies. It's quite an impressive company you've built. Sophie moved closer to Marcus, her arm threading through his possessively. Elena Morgan, she said, her voice sweet but with an edge. That's such a pretty name. You look familiar. Have we met before? My stomach clenched. Sophie was studying me more carefully than Marcus had. Women always looked closer, noticed more details. I don't believe so, I said smoothly. I've only recently moved back to the city. Before that, I was working in Europe for several years. The lie came easily. It was part of the background Mr. Chin's team had created for me, complete with fake social media profiles and references from overseas companies that were actually shell corporations controlled by Chin Investment. Europe, Sophie said, still looking at me with narrowed eyes. How exotic. What brought you back? Opportunity, I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. The American market is much more dynamic right now, and I enjoy challenges. Marcus laughed. Well, you've certainly built quite a reputation quickly, Ms. Morgan. Though I have to say, some of your consulting advice has been rather aggressive toward my company. So he had noticed. I smiled, a calculated expression that showed confidence without arrogance. I give my clients honest assessments, Mr. Hart. If that advice seems aggressive toward Hart Technologies, perhaps you should ask yourself why your partners are seeking ways to reduce their risk exposure. The dance. The tension in the group was palpable. Robert looked uncomfortable, like he regretted making this introduction. Sophie's eyes flashed with anger at my subtle challenge to her husband. But Marcus's expression changed to something like respect. Fair enough, he said. Perhaps we could discuss it over a dance. I find business conversations go better with a little movement. Before I could respond, Sophie tightened her grip on his arm. Darling, you promised me the next dance. And you'll have the one after, Marcus said, gently extracting his arm. But I think Ms. Morgan and I have some business to discuss. Don't we? He extended his hand toward me, and I had a choice. I could refuse and maintain my distance, or I could accept and get closer to my enemy. The decision took less than a second. I'd be delighted, I said, taking his hand. Marcus led me to the dance floor as the orchestra began playing a slow waltz. His hand settled on my waist, and we began to move. It felt surreal, dancing. With my ex-husband, who didn't know who I was. Once upon a time, we danced together at our wedding, full of hope and love. Now we danced as strangers, with secrets and schemes between us. You're very direct, Ms. Morgan, Marcus said as we moved across the floor. I appreciate that in business. Too many consultants tell clients what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. And what do you need to hear, Mr. Hart? I asked, looking up at him. This close, I could see the new lines around his eyes, the gray hairs starting to appear at his temples. The stress was showing. Marcus was quiet for a moment, guiding me through a turn. I need to hear that my company will survive the next year. That all the hard work I've put in won't crumble because of a few bad investments and some economic uncertainty. There was vulnerability in his voice that surprised me. The old me would have wanted to comfort him, to reassure him everything would be okay. But the new me recognized this for what it was, a weakness I could exploit. Survival isn't guaranteed for any company, Mr. Hart, I said softly. But there are always options. Ways to restructure, to bring in new capital, to pivot the business model. The question is whether you're willing to make the hard choices necessary to save what you've built. What kind of hard choices? Marcus asked, his eyes searching my face. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only he could hear. The kind where you admit you can't do everything alone. Where you bring in partners or advisors who can shore up your weaknesses. Where you let go of pride and accept help before it's too late. Marcus's jaw tightened. I've never been good at asking for help. I know, I said, then caught myself. I mean, that seems obvious from your situation. Pride comes before a fall, Mr. Hart. Remember that. The seeds of doubt. The song ended, and we stopped dancing. Marcus held my hand for a moment longer than necessary, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're an interesting woman, Ms. Morgan. I'd like to continue this conversation sometime. Perhaps over dinner? Behind him, I could see Sophie watching us with barely concealed fury. The old jealousy was there, the same possessiveness she'd probably felt when Marcus was still married to me. Good. Let her feel threatened. Let her worry. I'll have my assistant send you my availability, I said, pulling my hand away. But I should warn you, Mr. Hart. My consulting fees are quite high, and my advice isn't always what people want to hear. Marcus smiled. I'm starting to think that might be exactly what I need. I walked away from him, feeling his eyes on my back. As I crossed the room, Robert caught up with me. That was bold, he said quietly. Dancing with Marcus Hart when you've been advising his partners to distance themselves from him. Sometimes you have to get close to your target to hit the bullseye, I replied. The rest of the gala passed in a blur of conversations and networking. I talked with other business leaders, made new connections, planted more seeds of doubt about Hart Technologies. Every conversation was a careful move in the larger game I was playing. But my mind kept drifting back to those moments on the dance floor with Marcus. The way he hadn't recognized me. The way he'd looked at me with interest, maybe even attraction. The way Sophie had watched us with jealous eyes. Everything was going according to plan. Better than planned, actually. Marcus was interested in Elena Morgan as a consultant. That would give me access to the inner workings of his company, a chance to see the financial problems up close. And Sophie's jealousy was an unexpected bonus. Jealousy made people act irrationally, made them make mistakes. The unexpected emotion. That night, back in my apartment, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. My feet hurt from the heels, and I was exhausted, but I felt electric with success. The gala had been perfect. Marcus had played right into my hands. So why did I feel this strange emptiness in my chest? I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down, letting my mind wander back through the evening. Dancing with Marcus had brought back memories I tried to bury. The early days of our relationship, when he actually listened to me, valued my opinions. The way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. Before ambition and Sophie had poisoned everything. My phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Chun. Well done tonight. Marcus Hart is asking about you. He wants a formal consultation. This is exactly what we needed. I typed back a reply confirming I'd received the message. This was what I wanted. A chance to get inside Hart Technologies, to see the problems firsthand, to position myself perfectly for the final takeover. So why did part of me feel like I was betraying something? I shook off the feeling. That was the old Elena talking, the woman who'd been too trusting, too forgiving. The new Elena Morgan knew better. Marcus had betrayed me, humiliated me, tried to erase all my contributions to his success. He deserved everything that was coming to him. The takeover preparation. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Chin's office for an emergency meeting. He was standing by his window, looking out at the city with a satisfied expression. Marcus Hart's assistant called this morning requesting a consultation meeting with you. He's desperate, Elena. The walls are closing in on him, and he knows it. When does he want to meet? I asked. Next Tuesday. At his office. He's offering your standard consulting rate, no negotiations. Mr. Chun turned to look at me. This is our chance. Once you're